Today's documentary is personal to me, as this location has been a part of my childhood for the past 6 years. As I've learned more about the property known as Fairfield Hills State Hospital, during its time of abandonment, I've heard many stories about unfairly treated patients, alleged patient deaths, and more stories to scare locals. But as I've grown up, I found an interest in urban exploring, and always found it fascinating to go inside of these buildings and find the history left behind the once famous Connecticut hospital. Since its closure in 1995, the buildings on the property have either been demolished or renovated under the new name of Fairfield Hills Campus, after the property was acquired by the city of Newtown. Soon enough, most of the buildings on the property will be demolished, including 4 of the biggest ones on the southwest end of the property, scheduled for demolition in the upcoming years. So before this unknown relic of rumors and missing history are lost to time, let's travel back to unveil the once not so proudly known Fairfield Hills State Hospital.
Psychiatric aid is no man's keeper but his own. His living. This ward is his work world. It's a strange world to us.
The state of Connecticut needed a huge expansion on their mental institutions, as the two running at the time, the Norwich State Hospital, which would soon become the sister location of Fairfield Hills, and is now abandoned as well, in much worse condition than their sister location, and the Connecticut Valley Hospital, which was struggling to accommodate space for patients. The state of Connecticut began making plans for a new mental institution, and settled on building it in the city of Newtown, on the branching off roads Weserman Way and Mile Hill Road into the 770-acre plot of land. After the location of the property was sorted, the next step was to find the architects to build the complex. Connecticut settled on an architect by the name of Walter P. Cachabry. He was well known in the state for his business block buildings and private homes in New Britain. He designed the complex to be a campus-like facility where buildings had been modified to a colonial style / Art Deco style. On the property, out of the 770 acres, only 100 was used for the total of 36 buildings on the property, and the rest was untouched land. The 36 buildings on the property consisted of 3 categories: administration, employee, and the patient treatment and housing for the mentally disabled or insane. They also included a farm with a slaughterhouse. These buildings were much ahead of their time and prepared for many situations, with the addition of fireproofing fitted largely throughout them, railings and latches in bathrooms, mainly fitted to bathtubs and showers for patients to either cling onto or keep confined to their space. One of the administration buildings, being the power plant, was a large power hub for the entire property, keeping heat, running water, and electricity throughout the entire buildings, which I found to be astonishing, as the power plant was located down an entire 1 to 2 blocks from the main facility. There was also a train station located just across from it, which brought goods and some people to and from the facility. So how could they transport goods and people from building to building on such a large space? Well, then you would have to learn about the tunnels. Fairfield Hills largely used transportation from building to building were the numerous tunnels. All buildings were connected from what I've seen, as the tunnel plans are hard to find. They transported goods like foods, tools, medical equipment, and people. Sometimes they were staff like doctors, nurses, security, or guests, others patients, dead or alive. And that's correct, Fairfield Hills administration building called Yale Laboratory was a cremation building for dead patients. The tunnels were useful during harsh weather or cold seasons throughout the year. Along the tunnels were vital electric feeds, water, and heat pipes that followed the same path when exiting the power plant. Fairfield Hills' first cornerstone was laid down on June 10th in 1931. The facility was originally named the Fairfield State Hospital until it was renamed to the Fairfield Hills Hospital in 1936. By 1933, Fairfield State Hospital opened to the public with its first almost 500 patients and only 3 doctors. By post-war times, all the way up until the 1960s, Fairfield Hills gained over 4,000 patients, with 170 employees being 20 doctors, 50 nurses, and another 100 assorted staff. Patients of Fairfield Hills were allowed to roam freely through their designated areas at first. In the beginning, there were no bars on the windows until the 1960s. Patients' rooms had natural light from big windows. They could also help work on the farm with staff. whether it be in the slaughterhouse or storing new food for the patients, and so on. They also helped with nursing in the facility. Families could visit their patients, and Fairfield Hills even had their own baseball team after 2 baseball fields were added to the property in the 1950s. Patients would usually have hydrotherapy, insulin shock therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, and frontal lobotomy treatments done to them. In the first year of psychosurgery being performed at the facility, 100 patients were treated. Fairfield Hills was in its prime until the 60s, when the first treatment was made to help the mentally disabled. It was called the Thorazine drug. Afterwards, the deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals like Fairfield Hills took place. It only took 30 years before the closure of the property in 1995, with its last 200 patients being moved to the Connecticut Valley Hospital. Since then, the city of Newtown took over operations and the ownership of the property. From 1995 to present, half of the property has been demolished, with only 19 out of the 36 still standing, while 4 of those have been refurbished. The Stratford Hall, now called the Asylum Brewery, Bridgemore Hall, now called the Newtown Municipal Center, and the Washington Square, now Parent Connection, and the additional building, now Newtown Social Services. There was also a new building placed on the original Cannon and Bridgewater building properties, the Newtown Community Center, and the NYA Sports and Fitness. And that brings us to today. The rest of the property is still abandoned and left in uncertainty. There have been multiple attempts to refurbish all of the buildings, mainly Kent and Shellen House, but have never came to be. There was an attempt to refurbish Shellen House into condos, but due to the over amount of constant vandalization, it was abandoned once again. Due to this, 4 of the most southwest buildings on the property are now scheduled for demolition in the near future. Those being Cochrane House, Norwalk Hall, Stamford Hall, and Plymouth Hall. My thoughts on Fairfield Hills, even knowing the history and the personal connection with the property, I don't see a foreseeable future for the remaining structures, especially after the failure in Shellen. Soon enough, I believe, one by one, the last remaining buildings will be demolished and the land will be repurposed. I hope I can be proven wrong, but it just doesn't seem possible for these remaining buildings to be repurposed with the state that they're in. If you ever come to the Newtown area, I recommend you go there just to walk around the property and look up to those buildings, remembering their purpose. Even though their history isn't that great, they're still a rare thing to come by. I do not recommend you go inside them, as it is a trespassing fine of $100. This is the end of Fairfield Hills for now. Thank you all for watching today. I have another 2 documentaries on the way. They aren't ship related, but after those 2, I have another 2 ship documentaries coming up. But for now, that's it.